Hey guys, tonight we set sail not on a luxury cruise or aboard some steampunk dirigible, but in a long, hand-carved, double-hulled canoe slicing through the pre-dawn waters off 19th-century Hawaii. The stars are fading. The breeze carries the scent of salt, and something softer, maybe crushed seaweed, or that lingering smoke from someone's early morning emu pit. Your crew is silent. The ocean isn't. The ocean. You're barefoot, half awake, and already questioning your life decisions because you, my friend, are expected to navigate over hundreds of miles of open ocean without a single map. No Google Earth, no compass, not even a helpful "you are here" sign. Just a canoe, your instincts, and a mental database of waves, birds, and sky. And yes, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is over there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch beside your navigator Kahuna Kilo Hoku or Star Watcher as he mutters things you don't understand under his breath. You're not even sure he's talking to you. Maybe he's whispering to the sea, or the wind, or to that overly judgmental albatross circling above you like it knows you forgot your training. The horizon glows with pink fire. The water feels alive, tugging at the canoe like it wants to tell a secret. This is no random launch. The crew waited days for this exact moment, just the right phase of the moon, a certain cloud shape over Maui, and 3 stars that had to line up in the early hours. Historians still argue whether this timing was purely observational or if there were deeper spiritual signals involved. Either way, it's not superstition. It's science. Hawaiian style. You grip the edge of the canoe. Toes curled, eyes wide. The navigator doesn't look worried. In fact, he's gently humming. Not to relax himself, no. He's calibrating. That chant he's singing, it's a mnemonic. A sung chart. Every note, every phrase corresponds to stars, swells, and islands. He's literally singing the map into his memory. As you glance at the vast blue yawn before you, it hits you, this isn't just about travel. It's survival. It's lineage. It's, well, sort of like trying to navigate a CVS at 3 a.m. while sleep-deprived and wearing one sock, except the stakes are higher, and there's no granola bar aisle to save you. The canoe slides forward, steady and quiet. Each paddle stroke is purposeful, even meditative. One paddler, barely out of childhood, stares at the ocean's surface like it's a classroom blackboard. Another has her eyes glued to the clouds, yes, clouds, because their shape and movement might mean there's an island lurking below the horizon invisible to most. The canoe you're on is not a single vessel, but 2 sleek hulls connected by crossbeams and an elevated platform. Think catamaran, but handcrafted and spiritual. This design is stable, fast, and most importantly proven. Your ancestors crossed thousands of miles in this. No metal, no engines, just wood lashings, guts, and the stars. Some scholars used to scoff at this. Surely they drifted randomly, they'd say often, while sipping tea and ignoring the Pacific. But those days are over. Today, the evidence speaks ancient Polynesians, including 19th-century Hawaiians, were deliberate strategic navigators. Their canoes were their Teslas. Their brains were their GPS. You watch your navigator tap the gunwale gently 3 times. That's a signal. Course correction. The paddlers adjust slightly. You don't see what he sees, but he clearly does. Maybe it's the way the swells shifted a half-inch to the left. Maybe it's a specific feel of the wind. There's a term ka'alehelehe o kekai, the chattering of the sea. Navigators didn't just see the ocean, they listened. Swells bouncing off distant islands create patterns. A certain echo, a certain rhythm tells the navigator, "Oh hey, there's land to your northeast, just keep going another 100 miles. You know, easy. Oh, and speaking of easy, you're already sunburned, mildly seasick, and wondering how anyone memorizes a sky full of stars without developing permanent neck pain. But your navigator doesn't flinch. He adjusts his position ever so slightly, as if dancing with the canoe itself. Bird song floats in from somewhere. A tern. Not random. Birds like that don't stray far from land. You squint into the sky, hopeful. Maybe this trip will be shorter than expected. Or maybe you're just really, really bad at sea travel. You shift on the woven mat beneath you and realize how much more comfortable a lazy boy would be right now. But no one here complains. This isn't a journey. It's a ritual, a sacred reenactment of centuries of memory. You're not just paddling to a place, you're paddling through time. Remember that overly judgmental albatross? Yeah, it just pooped on the outrigger. Some things even ancient wisdom can't avoid. The swells are your seatmates now, constant and rhythmic like a heartbeat beneath the canoe. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, because that would be wildly irresponsible out here, but to focus. Your navigator has gone completely still, head tilted, hand dangling into the sea like he's shaking hands with the ocean itself. He's reading the water, not with his eyes but through his skin. You try it too, dragging your fingers just beneath the surface, but all you feel is water. Salty, cool, a little judgmental. But he feels something different, the direction and force of the swells. And not just one swell, but several. Because as it turns out, the Pacific Ocean isn't some gentle one-trick ripple machine. It's a layered cake of moving energy. There's the main swell Kai Ma'alea, the dominant one that usually runs in the direction of the prevailing winds. Then there are the reflected swells Nalu Haule bouncing back off distant islands, telling secrets from 100 miles away. Your navigator layers them in his mind, overlays their angles, and voila, you have direction. Historians still argue whether this knowledge came from trial and error observation, or whether it was passed down in some structured curriculum disguised as oral storytelling. But out here it doesn't matter. The result is the same orientation by swell. You peek at your navigator again. He shifts his weight and taps twice near the starboard hull. Another subtle correction. You ask him quietly what he saw. He smiles and points to a spot in the water where two sets of ripples cross in an odd diamond shape. You squint, nod, pretend you totally saw it too, but all you're really seeing is your own reflection and the distinct expression of, I should have paid more attention during navigation training. These wave patterns, sometimes called ohiki kai or ocean footprints, are as dependable as road signs if you know how to read them. In fact, they're more dependable. Try getting your GPS to work out here with no signal. Go on, I'll wait. One of the more experienced paddlers suddenly gestures to the east, and everyone shifts their gaze. A faint trail in the water, barely more than a shimmer, marks the wake of a distant reef or submerged landmass. That's another clue. Reefs bend the ocean, create turbulence you can't always see but can sometimes feel if your senses are tuned like a harp. Quirky detail time. Some navigators, especially in Micronesia, but also among Hawaiian masters, could sit blindfolded on the hull of a canoe and still tell you the direction of land based solely on the feel of the waves beneath their thighs. Yes, their thighs. What's your thigh doing right now? Not much. Yeah, exactly. You lean back a little, the sun now higher, a bit too warm, and your back muscles are gently informing you that canoes were not designed with lumbar support in mind. But you're here to learn. So you ask, how do you know if you're still on course? Your navigator tells you that even slight deviations drifting just a degree or two off can send you far off your intended landfall. Like missing the island completely kind of far. So how do you stay on track? By talking to the ocean, he says simply, which is both charming and utterly terrifying. But you watch as he holds out his hand again, feeling the direction of the swell. He points at a cloud bank forming ahead. Low, long, and oddly stable. You raise an eyebrow. What could a cloud tell you? Plenty, apparently. Certain cloud formations, Naho Ailona o Kalani, can form above islands due to the way warm land air pushes up and condenses moisture. They're like lighthouses but fluffier, a kind of sky hint that land is near. You feel a gust of wind, notice a temperature shift. Another clue. All these signs build up not just one, but a composite sketch of where you are and where you're going. It's navigation as jazz-structured, improvised, sensory, and deeply, deeply practiced. Historians sometimes dismiss this as intuitive knowledge, but that's like saying a concert pianist just guesses where to place their fingers. This is refined intuition, sharpened by years of experience. Stories, training, and failure. Speaking of failure, you glance down and realize your water gourd is nearly empty. Rookie mistake. Luckily, the navigator has a second one tucked into the lashings because, again, this is not his first rodeo. By now, the canoe is well out of sight of land. There's nothing around you but sea sky and a couple of seabirds that may or may not be trolling you with their smug aerial confidence. You feel a bit exposed, vulnerable, like one small hiccup in the ocean's mood could send you spinning into oblivion. And yet oddly you feel calm. The canoe moves smoothly. The paddlers are in rhythm. The navigator seems relaxed. You're part of something old, something precise, something built not on maps, but on muscle memory and attentiveness to nature. Somewhere off in the distance, the ocean changes again, just slightly. A new swell brushes beneath the canoe. The navigator nods. You've passed into a new current band, one that curves toward the island you're seeking. You smile. You didn't notice the shift yourself, but he did. And you're beginning to understand how someone could spend a lifetime reading waves like pages in a book. Just don't ask your thighs to do the sensing. Yet the stars return before you expect them. It's dusk now, and the sun has taken its last fiery bow behind you. In its place comes a soft indigo dome, pierced by a slow bloom of stars, like someone's shaking a salt shaker over velvet. You sit back on the woven platform of the canoe and watch your navigator come alive in a new way. All day he was in tune with the sea, touching, listening, responding. But now, with the sun gone and the moon yawning upward, he shifts focus upward. This is his realm now. Not maps, not instruments, just a brain full of starlines, myths, and muscle memory. You've seen people look at the sky before, but not like this. His gaze is like he's reading a familiar face. One by one, stars pop into view. First, Hokulea, the star of gladness rising on the eastern horizon. That one matters. It's a zenith star for Hawaii, meaning when it's directly overhead, you're dead center in the islands. You whisper its name to yourself, half prayer, half anchor. You ask your navigator how many stars he knows. He shrugs, says it depends on the season. But he can name over 200 by their Hawaiian names, describe where they rise and set, and tell you which ones form the Kilo Hoku, the star lines. Star lines are, well, not constellations exactly. They're highways. Each line is a series of stars that rise and set in a straight-ish path across the ocean, pointing toward islands. Some lines take you to Tahiti, others to Rapa Nui. Still others curve north toward the Marquesas. Memorizing them all is like holding a spiderweb of light in your mind. And your navigator, he knows the whole glowing net. Historians still debate whether these star lines were developed independently or were part of a shared Polynesian knowledge system stretching thousands of miles. Either way, they work, and they've worked for centuries. Now that the sky's fully dark, your navigator begins to chant softly again. You recognize the rhythm. It's the same one from this morning, but the words have changed. This chant is a night chant, mapping which stars should be rising now and which should fall away as you sail. You lean back and try to follow along. The chant lists stars not just by name, but by personality. Hokupau, the exhausted one who rises late. Iwakaliai, the warlike one. Melemele, the soft yellow star. It's like he's introducing old friends. Here's the tricky bit: stars move. Not wildly, but enough. Each night they rise at different times, shift subtly with the seasons. Your navigator accounts for this. His chant adjusts. It's not just rote memorization, it's adaptive living memory. Above you, the stars ripple on the ocean's surface like someone painted the sky on wet silk. You notice how the canoe keeps its nose pointed just slightly to the left of Hokulea. That's intentional. Your destination lies along a line between two stars, Hokulea, and Ke Ali'i o Kona I Ka Lewa, the chief of the southern sky. You ask how they find their way when the stars disappear like on cloudy nights. He shrugs again and says, "You remember where they should be." Then he adds, "And if you forget, the ocean will remind you." Comforting. But it's not just stars. The moon matters too. Its position, its phase, the shadows it casts on the water. Even the color of moonlight can hint at changing weather. Your navigator notes all of this quietly, constantly. He doesn't log it in a notebook. He logs it in his bones. There's a gentle rocking now, a steady sway like a cradle. Someone begins softly drumming the edge of the canoe with their fingers. Not music exactly, more like a grounding pulse. You join in. Everyone's awake, but the vibe is dreamy, hypnotic, peaceful. Here's a weird historical tidbit for you. During long voyages, some wayfinders would lie back with their eyes closed and simply feel the stars. Not metaphorically, literally. If a certain star was expected to rise on the left, but the warm spot on their cheek wasn't there, adjust course. They were calibrated to starlight. You can't tell if your navigator is doing that now, but he does have a serene look, like someone who's exactly where they're meant to be. You glance up and try to track the stars yourself. It's hard. They move slowly, deceptively. And there's so many of them. It's like trying to count raindrops on a windshield. And yet your navigator knows them like old relatives. He's pieced together a star clock and compass from glittering specks of hydrogen, and he's steering you straight with it. By now you're far from land, just sky and sea. But with the star paths glowing above, you don't feel lost. You feel connected, like you've stepped into an invisible web that's been spun across the ocean for centuries, and you're being gently tugged home along one of its shining strands. One last note before you nod off for a moment: the canoe never stops moving. Even if the stars disappear behind clouds, or the sea grows restless, someone always knows which way to point the bow. Because the navigator doesn't rely on just the stars. He's got backup, but we'll get to that soon. The clouds sneak in overnight, rolling across the sky like sleepy guards changing shift. You wake with a start, not from a storm or crashing waves, but from the absence of stars. It's like someone pulled the plug on your celestial nightlight. The ocean's still calm, the canoe rocking gently, but your sense of direction totally gone. Not for your navigator, though. He doesn't even blink, just turns his head slightly and listens to the wind, the water, the occasional splash of a curious fish. You realize this is part of the plan. You panic. He doesn't. Welcome to the next layer of traditional navigation reading everything else. Clouds, birds, fish, even the color of the water. You start to notice that while the sky's a soft, reflective gray, there's a brighter patch far off to port. A low, flat cloud, almost like a lazy blanket. Your navigator points at it. "Island," he says. You squint. "Cloud, you ask." He smiles and shrugs. "Same thing, apparently. Here's how it works. Islands reflect sunlight up into the sky, especially in early morning. When moisture catches that light, it forms specific types of clouds above land masses. These aren't storm clouds. They're island indicators. A kind of natural neon sign flashing land this way, if you know how to read it. Historians still argue whether ancient navigators relied more on direct visual cues like this, or on star-based extrapolation, but it's likely they used both. Redundancy was their safety net. Fail one method, lean on another. Clouds aren't the only clues. You spot a bird circling above, long wings, sharp turns. A koa I kea, the white-tailed tropic bird. Your navigator watches it carefully. These birds don't fly more than about 40 kilometers from land. If they're heading out in the morning, they're foraging. If they're flying inward in the evening, they're heading home. Either way, they're breadcrumbs in the sky. Now that you're watching for them, you see more Noyo black noddies, Iwaewa sooty terns, some flying low, some high, each with their own range and pattern. Your navigator names them like he's reading a guest list. These birds are his colleagues. Reliable, well-behaved, slightly feathery co-workers. The wind shifts and the sails catch it just right. You hear the sound change, not louder, just different. The paddlers adjust. The entire canoe responds like it's breathing. You've officially entered the world of sensory navigation. Everything matters now. The wind's angle, the moisture on your skin, even the smell of the sea, which weirdly starts to smell. Greener, saltier. It's hard to explain, but something is changing. Quirky historical tidbit: there are reports of navigators sniffing the air near known island chains and claiming to smell land. It sounds absurd until you realize how acute their senses had to be. Volcanic soil, dense jungle, even seabird colonies give off distinct scents that drift over the water. And when your life depends on noticing subtle shifts, you train your nose like a bloodhound. Back to the water. The color changes too. What was deep blue is now a murkier turquoise. That's because you're entering shallower territory. More sunlight bounces back from the seafloor. In traditional navigation, this is called ka olelo o ke kai, the speech of the sea. The sea tells you where you are if you listen. You peer over the side and spot a small fish darting beneath the canoe, silver twitchy and very sure of itself. Your navigator nods approvingly. Land fish. Apparently certain species like naku'uku'u and aweoweo hang closer to shorelines. Seeing them is like running into a subway rat near your stop. Gross but helpful. He's watching the surface now. Not the horizon, just the way the ripples shift around the canoe. That's the real giveaway. Swells change when they hit underwater reefs or shoals. Even if you don't see the island yet, the ocean already knows it's there. Another subtle tell. The clouds themselves are moving differently, staggered slower. That means they're dragging across the microclimate caused by landmass heating. You're close. Closer than you'd ever guess just by glancing around. Suddenly the navigator kneels, scoops a bit of seawater, sniffs it, and licks his finger. You stare at him. He grins. Tastes wrong, he says. Island nearby. You taste it too. Still salty. Still seawater. But maybe a little duller. Less bite. Maybe it's the sediment from a river estuary mixing in. Or maybe you've just been at sea long enough to start hallucinating flavors. Either way, he's convinced. It's not even mid-morning yet, and you've been given a full masterclass in non-visual wayfinding: clouds, birds, color, scent, even taste. You're starting to see the ocean not as empty space, but as a textured living thing, a map that talks if you'll shut up and listen. One paddler, silent till now, whispers, "Look." You follow his pointing hand, and far on the horizon there's a break in the color, a slightly darker smudge where ocean meets sky. You wouldn't have noticed it on your own. But now that it's been pointed out, it's all you see. Land. You don't cheer. No one does. That's not the custom. You just sit with it. Let it settle in. You're not there yet. Still hours to go. But you know you're close. And more importantly, you didn't use a single map to get here. Just clouds, birds, fish, and your own retuned human senses. You lean back again, and this time the clouds seem less oppressive. They're not hiding the stars. They're simply taking their shift. Watching over you from above while the sea handles the rest. The canoe drifts onward, silent but sure, as you begin to understand just how much it takes to become a true navigator, a kilo hollow moana, one who reads the sea by motion, memory, and miracle. Your navigator didn't wake up one day, stretch, and decide to become an oceanic Jedi. No, this was a calling, a lifestyle, and frankly a grueling apprenticeship that would make most of us tap out before lunch on day one. You glance at him now, squatting on the hull eyes, scanning everything and nothing. He's calm-centered, not just because he's practiced, but because he endured years, sometimes decades of learning. Not school learning, not lecture halls or PowerPoints. We're talking full sensory immersion. Think Navy SEALs meet Montessori with a little cosmic poetry thrown in. The training starts young. You might begin as a kama aina, a child of the land learning the coastline first. You're expected to memorize tide patterns, wind behaviors where the sun rises between mountain peaks throughout the year. You don't get gold stars. You get barked at by elders and a head full of chants. Then comes the open water. That's where you get broken and remade. You remember hearing once, a navigator must forget time. And out here it makes sense. You learn to live by cycles, moon phases, star positions, wind moods. Time as a clock. Useless. Time as a rhythm. Essential. A lot of the training happens through mo'olelo oral stories, but these aren't just tales. They're instruction manuals disguised as bedtime narratives. A myth about a shark god might actually contain tidal information. A canoe chant might double as a map of the Tuamotu Islands. You never know which line is poetry and which is GPS, so you memorize them all. Historians still debate how structured this education was. Some say it was informal, others claim it involved specific tests and lineage-based access. What we do know is that very few earned the title of Master Navigator. It required not just knowledge, but an intuitive grasp of nature's hidden patterns. You ask your navigator what the hardest part of training was. He thinks for a while, then says, "Learning to feel without doubt," which sounds mystical, but it makes sense. During training, apprentices are tested constantly. You might be taken out blindfolded, spun around, and asked which direction you're facing. Or you're put on night watch with no stars and told to track subtle swell changes using only your back. Failure isn't punished cruelly, but it's not gently handled either. You're expected to know or to shut up and learn. Sometimes you just sit in the canoe and listen. For hours. Feeling the boat's rhythm, the wind's hiss, the small, almost imagined change in current when you pass over a sunken reef. You might think it's boring, until you realize it's your exam. And it's not just nature you're expected to master. You also learn ceremony, how to bless a voyage, how to read omens, how to chant the names of your ancestors who once made this exact crossing. Because in traditional Hawaiian wayfinding, every journey is a conversation with the past. There's even an element of endurance. You train your body to survive long, salty, cramped journeys. No luxuries, just grit. Sleeping on woven mats, eating dried fish, keeping balance as the canoe shudders through swells. A weak stomach or fragile ego will not survive this path. But here's the kicker. Your training never really ends. Even when you become a navigator, you keep learning. Every voyage is different. Every island whispers a new riddle. Some say a good navigator doesn't just know where he is, he knows where he is not. You ask him what that means. He taps the sea. If you know where the swells aren't from, you know which island is not near. It's delightfully unhelpful and yet somehow deeply profound. One fringe tidbit: some apprentices were taught to use their dreams as navigational insight. They'd fast meditate sleep near the sea and sometimes awaken with a feeling of direction. Was it superstition? Intuition? Who knows? But hey, if my phone battery died at sea, I'd start praying to whichever dream god would listen. You watch as your navigator adjusts the course once more based on, well, something invisible. A faint shift in the wind, a tone in a bird's cry, a tension in the air. You don't know. But he does. He always seems to. And this, you realize, is why he's in charge. Not because he has the most facts, but because he has the clearest calm. Out here, data is important, but presence is everything. He starts to hum again softly, and it takes you a second to recognize the chant. It's about the constellations of the southern sky, the ones you can't see right now because of the clouds. He's anchoring their position in his mind anyway, tracking their path behind the haze. Your legs are cramping, your water supply's low, you have sunscreen in your eye, but still you wouldn't trade this moment. The navigator ends his chant, gives a nod, and says, "We're closer than we think." You believe him, not because you see land, but because you're starting to feel it too. The canoe rocks, gently humming its way across the sea, like a lullaby whispered in wood and salt. You sit near the center now, legs stretched back, aching, trying to mimic your navigator's composure. But your mind is busy. Not with stars or swells this time, but with something deeper, something older. He's chanting again, not a navigation chant this time, but something more, cosmic. His voice dips and rises in hypnotic waves. The words are ancient, unfamiliar, yet oddly comforting. They roll across the sea and settle in your chest like warm tea. It's the Kumulipo. At first you think it's just a chant, a really long one. But then he tells you this isn't just genealogy, it's orientation. A roadmap woven into the origin of the universe. The Kumulipo is both bedtime story and cosmic spreadsheet. You lean in closer, trying to understand. In the chant, light and darkness take turns birthing each other. Sea creatures emerge before land ones. Plants precede people. And everything has a place, a direction, a purpose. In a world where maps are carved into memory, this chant becomes your North Star, even when there's no stars at all. Historians still argue whether the Kumulipo was truly used as navigational training or was simply spiritual. But your navigator says it plainly: if you understand where you come from, you'll never get lost. And you believe him. He continues chanting, and with each line you realize it's not just mythology. It's metadata. The rising of certain stars is linked to the birth of certain gods. Each plant in the chant has a wind it grows best in. Each sea creature is born under a certain moon phase. The chant is code, and you're just now learning how to read it. He pauses, fingers tapping on the gunwale. Then he starts reciting another oli, a smaller chant. This one names the winds. Yes, the winds. Each Hawaiian island has its own set of winds, and each wind has a name, a personality, a signature. You listen as he lists them like old friends. Apa Apa are strong and dry. Lililehua soft and misty. He closes his eyes and smiles. You feel a breeze and ask, which one is this? He tilts his head and says, cue a wind that bends. You nod, not really knowing what that means, but somehow it fits. One fringe detail. Ancient Hawaiians believed certain winds could carry messages from the gods. If your canoe was stuck in the doldrums, a kahuna might offer prayers to Eka Eka, a restless wind, or even toss sweet-smelling flowers into the sea to coax the breeze back. Practical, maybe not. Beautiful, absolutely. The idea is this navigation wasn't separate from spirituality. It was fused. The universe wasn't a cold void. It was a singing map, alive with intention. And your job as navigator was to learn the lyrics. Your own modern mind resists. You want hard data, satellite pings, weather forecasts. But out here, none of that matters. What matters is rhythm, pattern, trust. Your navigator doesn't guess where you are, he aligns himself with the cosmic playlist. And so far he hasn't missed a beat. You watch as he picks up a small bowl from beneath the lashings. It's filled with fresh water, carefully covered with a lid made of banana leaf. He uncovers it, stares into the reflection. Star mirror, he says. You blink. Seriously. He nods. Sometimes when you can't see the stars above, you can find them below. Apparently on still nights with the canoe stable, you can track star positions by their reflection on calm water or on a still bowl. It's not just clever. It's poetic. It's one of those things that makes you pause and smile like an idiot. You glance at the sky. The clouds are thinning, stars reappearing. Hokulea twinkles like it never left. You breathe easier. Your navigator doesn't acknowledge the change. He just keeps chanting, keeps tracking. You notice he's humming a line again. Hiali'i ka aina hikawa ke kanaka. The land is chief, the people are its servants. You get it now. To navigate here isn't to conquer the sea, it's to serve it, to partner with it, to remember your place in the hierarchy of all things. And for a moment that hierarchy feels right. You're not the master of your fate tonight. You're a student in a classroom made of stars, wind, and deep humming chants. And your teacher is not just your navigator, it's the sea itself. As the canoe slides onward, the air smells faintly of salt oil and something floral, maybe Thai leaves packed in the canoe. The sky is clearing, the stars are back, and you realize you're no longer afraid of being lost. Because you're not. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, even if you don't quite know where that is. The stars glimmer above, like glitter tossed by a patient god. But your navigator isn't looking up now. He's scanning the sea, squinting. Not for land, not yet, but for movement. For flashes of silver quick as a wink darting beneath the hull. You lean over cautiously and you see them too, fish. Small, fast, not impressive, unless you know what you're looking for. He murmurs, "Awo-wo," like it's both an observation and a blessing. To you, it's just a fish. To him, it's a pin on an invisible map. Ancient Hawaiian navigators knew that fish didn't just swim wherever they pleased. Different species followed different current paths, stayed close to particular islands, and even favored certain moon phases for spawning. If you know the fish, you know the sea's story. So yes, fish are GPS, but fish that move. He watches the school's direction, the way they twist the bubbles in their wake. Then he taps the hull gently, a signal. Course adjusted, no hesitation. Oh. You ask, couldn't they just be swimming? He smiles. Everything swims with a reason. Quirky detail for you, some fish like the moi, or a hole, were considered sacred and were associated with certain chiefs or regions. Catching them too far from home. That meant the currents had shifted. Or worse, your heading was wrong. These fish weren't just dinner. They were signs. Historians still debate how much fish knowledge was regional versus standardized across Polynesia. But there's one consistent theme: fish meant direction. Fishermen by necessity were navigators too. They knew the pelagic highways. The difference was that navigators turned that knowledge outward, across hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles. The fish aren't alone. You see jellyfish too, some glowing faintly in the pre-dawn light. Your navigator watches them drift and tells you which current you've entered. Apparently they're very reliable informants, if less exciting in conversation. You ask how long he's been using fish behavior this way. He shrugs. Since I was shorter than the paddle. Of course he was. He tells you about night fishing with his grandfather. The old man would crouch on the rocks, watch the waves, and call out fish names like he was greeting cousins. You learn their moods, he says. You learn when they lie. And fish do lie. They're not perfect guides. But when paired with swell memory windbirds and sky, they round out the story. They offer context. You start to think of the ocean not as one big wet place, but a complex city, each creature a citizen following known routines. A little traffic here, a shortcut there. One fringe tidbit: you wouldn't expect some navigators could even identify different types of flying fish by the sound of their bodies hitting the canoe at night. Apparently, it's a learned skill. You try to imagine waking from a half-doze, getting slapped in the face by a fish and going, "Ah, yes, lepe, we must be near the Maui Channel." Legendary. The navigator points again. This time it's not a fish, it's seaweed. Floating fronds of limu kohu, bright red, drifting on the water's surface. He nods. Another sign. Why? Because certain seaweeds only grow in specific regions. Some attach to reefs, others float loose, but are carried predictably by currents. Seaweed types change the closer you get to shore. The smell of them, too. It hits your nose, suddenly briny, tangy, earthy. A scent you haven't smelled in days. You sit up straighter. Your back still aches, but your brain perks up. Could it be land nearby, you ask? He doesn't answer. Not yet. There's a philosophy behind that silence. In Hawaiian navigation, no decision is based on a single sign. It's always the weaving of evidence. Birds alone. Not enough. Swells alone, incomplete. Fish clouds, sea color, smell. Temperature all must align. He's watching now for convergence, a swell shifting, a seabird's arc, a smell that stays, not fades. You notice something too: the water has lost its open ocean rhythm. The swells are smaller, choppier maybe. The canoe feels contained somehow, like it's being held. That's the reef's presence, unseen but absolutely there. Still no land in sight, just signs. Fish flashing, seaweed drifting, birds wheeling, and all of it saying you're almost there. You realize that your navigator doesn't panic because the ocean is talking to him constantly, not with words but with texture. And he speaks the language. You remember a saying from earlier, "The fish will tell you before the stars do." You believe it now. You lie back, the canoe rocking gently, stars fading into morning again. You feel the shift before you see it. Something deeper than instinct. Like your body knows the land is coming even if your eyes can't yet confirm it. And when you glance up, your navigator is smiling just slightly. You don't need to ask why. You're sprawled flat now, your spine molded to the woven mat beneath you as the canoe glides over a sheet of water so smooth it could be glass. No wind, no noise, just a gentle creak of lashings and the occasional splash from an oar blade rising and falling like breath. The stars are nearly gone, only a few stubborn ones cling to the edge of dawn and the horizon starts to blush with light. Your navigator is squatting beside a small pile of shells and stones. Odd at first glance, until he begins rearranging them in slow, deliberate patterns. A few paddlers nod quietly, gathering around, squinting at what looks suspiciously like a preschool art project. But you're learning not to underestimate anything out here. This is a shell map. Not permanent, not fancy. Just stones, shells, and driftwood fragments placed on a woven mat or the canoe deck to represent islands, currents, reefs, and prevailing winds. It's not cartography in the Western sense. There are no scale bars, no north arrows, but this system is deeply personal. Fluid, spatial memory made tangible. The kind of map that only makes sense if you've already internalized the ocean it represents. Your navigator nudges one shell slightly to the right. That's not just a decorative tweak. That shell is you, the canoe. And that nudge means you've just adjusted course. Historians still debate whether these kinds of visual aids, called rebelib or meddo in parts of Micronesia, were commonly used in Hawaii, or whether they were more oral and mental in practice. But some elders insist they were, and more importantly, they work. You sit up fascinated now. He shifts another shell, gestures at a line of smaller stones. Current, he says, then taps a curved piece of wood curled like a spine. Wind. You can't believe this makes sense, but it does. Suddenly, the ocean around you seems to materialize in miniature. You're looking down at the Pacific, as if from 1,000 feet above, and your own place in it clicks into perspective. Then he sweeps the whole thing away with one motion. Gone. You blink. That's part of the ritual. The map is not meant to last. It's a sketch in sand before the tide, a reminder that nothing in the ocean stays still. He notices your confusion and chuckles. If you rely on the drawing, you forget to feel. That tracks. This map is not for navigation, it's for conversation. A momentary visual explanation. You're not meant to study it. You're meant to be it. Another paddler gestures to the side of the canoe. You follow his gaze and see the familiar color shift in the water, deep indigo softening into jade. You're crossing a shallow reef zone. Not the surf-breaking kind yet, but the long arms of coral that stretch far from island shores. Your navigator crouches low, fingers dragging gently in the water again. He's not checking temperature. He's feeling the pressure change. Coral reefs disrupt swells in subtle ways. You can sense it in how the canoe moves now, less up and down, more side to side, like it's brushing the hem of something vast and hidden. You ask how he knows where the reef starts and ends. He nods toward the horizon. See that line? The ripple. You squint. A faint shimmer on the water where the light bends just so. You'd have missed it. He doesn't. That's the edge. The shimmer is called a refraction line, the way light bends differently over shallower water. Navigators could spot them and know where to sail between coral heads. A natural road, invisible unless you know where to look. And here's another odd but genius technique. If the canoe gets close enough to calm shallow water, you can see underwater structures clearly thanks to polarization. Ancient Hawaiians may not have had Ray-Bans, but they learned to tilt their heads just so to catch the glare at the right angle. Eyes trained by necessity. You lean over again, peering into the sea. Shapes begin to emerge, coral fans, maybe a turtle darting below sand patches that glimmer like mirrors. This isn't open ocean anymore. This is inshore storytelling, a new dialect in the language of waves. Your navigator tells you something unexpected. When children learned to sketch maps in the sand, they weren't taught directions first. They were taught relationships, where one island feels from another, which wines carry which scents, which fish disappear after certain moon cycles. Directional logic came second. Sensory storytelling came first. You sit with that. In a world of coordinates and graphs, this feels radical, but also somehow more human, more real. And of course, the sand sketches, you almost forgot. He draws a line in the palm of his hand. Sometimes he says you just draw with your finger. That's enough. Indeed it is. The sun now peaks over the ocean's lip, casting golden streaks across the bow. The reef is clearly visible now, the water glowing with life. Your canoe slows slightly, adjusting to the new rhythm. The ocean's tone has shifted from open symphony to shoreline lullaby. No one cheers, no one exclaims, but you can feel the change ripple through the crew, a subtle straightening of backs, a shift in breathing. You're close. Not close in miles necessarily, but close in knowing. A few paddlers hum softly. Not a chant, just a tune, wordless. Your navigator smiles, shifts slightly toward the east, and draws a new invisible line with his finger along the canoe's edge. Another kind of map, one you're starting to learn how to read. You're drifting closer now, not just to land, but to something that feels like understanding. The sea around you sparkles in the morning light, and yet your navigator is oddly still. Not watching the sky, not poking at the swells. He's listening. Not to nature this time, but to stories. Specifically gossip. You raise an eyebrow. Gossip on a canoe. Turns out in 19th century Hawaii navigators relied on far more than celestial memory and fish patterns. They listened, really listened to the rumors. Chants and casual tales passed from one island to another. The spoken word was as vital as the stars. You shift closer as he recounts one, a recent canoe from Kauai. Reported stronger currents than usual near Niihau. Another claimed the winds around Maui had shifted slightly, perhaps from a southern weather system. Neither of these things are in any formal record, but they're passed along from crew to crew like breadcrumbs. Historians still argue whether this inter-island storytelling counted as formal navigation or just travel lore. But your navigator shrugs at that distinction, if it gets you there. He says, does it matter what you call it? In this part of the ocean, whispers matter. Not all knowledge is grand or poetic. Some of it is beautifully petty. Which canoe flipped last week? Which bay smells different? Who saw the sharks moving upstream unusually early? Even the fishermen's complaints about low catch numbers can suggest subtle changes in the currents. You hear one paddler mutter about the limu tasting funny near Lanai lately. Your navigator nods. To you, that sounds like a culinary footnote. To him, it's a navigational red flag, possibly an upwelling of cooler water or runoff from rain, both of which suggest reef proximity and current changes. It's not unlike reading Yelp reviews. If Yelp were carved in oral poetry and scattered across islands, a fringe but fascinating practice. Some navigators would deliberately steer toward talkative islands, places known for frequent visitors, just to pick up the latest news. The islands themselves became waypoints, yes, but also information hubs. This was pre-radio, pre-print, pre-pretty much everything. Your weather forecast came from whoever just sailed in with salty eyebrows and a story to tell. Sometimes a chant would carry more than myth. It might include the time of a distant eruption, the last known hurricane path, or when the taro last failed on a neighbor island. All of this painted the sea in living color. You begin to realize that a good navigator was also part diplomat, part anthropologist, and part eavesdropper. That chant your navigator hummed last night. Half of it might have been directions. The other half, a warning not to trust a rival's weather reading. Your own ears perk up now. You begin to hear more in the paddler's casual murmurs, not idle chatter but updates. Who passed which island? What bird flew where? Someone recalls a journey last season when a white tern circled thrice over open water, and they knew then they were close to Kaho'olawe. All of it matters. All of it maps something. You smile suddenly, remembering how back home people lose their minds without turn-by-turn instructions. Here you've been navigating by rumor and birds. Your navigator shifts again, adjusting slightly for wind. Heard from Molokai they had southern gusts, he says. That explains it. He's responding not just to what's around him, but to what's been said about what's around him. Even the names of places reflect this. Some bays are called Kai Holo Leo, the sea where horses swim, a reference not to horses, but to the speed of current. Others are named for strange bird behavior or rare stars. Place names themselves contain embedded wayfinding clues if you know how to unpack them. You ask your navigator if people ever lie. He smirks. Of course. Some exaggerate, some forget, some want to protect their secrets. The ocean has politics too. Still, he says, the truth finds its way to the surface. Enough canoes pass. The ocean tells us what's real. And in the end, it's not about trusting every single word. It's about layering. A whisper from Lanai, a chant from Hawaii, a funny-smelling wind and a school of fish darting west. You don't trust any one thing, but together they sing the truth. You try to imagine your own life like that. Decisions based not on hard borders or strict lines, but on conversation. Nuance. Shifts. Feeling your way forward, not with certainty but with trust. And then your navigator points. You follow his hand and there it is. A curve on the horizon, faint but unmistakable. Land. But he doesn't smile yet. He's still reading the signs. Still waiting for confirmation from the waves, the birds, the air itself. He'll trust the gossip, sure. But he still listens for the ocean's final word, because out here even rumors must bow to the sea. The canoe rocks gently as the sea begins to whisper something new, something uneasy. You're close to land now, the scent of earth, faint but undeniable, and yet your navigator suddenly furrows his brow. His hand hovers above the water like it's reading Braille. He doesn't speak for a long moment, and then he says the words that make the paddlers fall into an immediate hush. We're near a no-go zone. You sit up straighter. That doesn't sound like the kind of place you want to be. He doesn't elaborate, not yet. But the change in mood is instant. One paddler tightens the cord on his paddle grip. Another adjusts the lashings. The wind hasn't changed. The sky is still clear, and the sea looks the same to you. But clearly something is different. The no-go zones aren't marked. They're not charted on any Western-style maps, and yet every seasoned navigator knows them. Sometimes they're areas of dangerous currents where underwater topography turns the sea into a washing machine. Sometimes they're zones of spiritual significance where stories say souls travel between worlds. Occasionally they're places where too many canoes simply vanished. Historians still argue whether these zones were based more on practical danger or cultural taboo. But when your navigator quietly alters course without looking up, you don't argue. He finally speaks softly. This stretch, currents get confused here, like they forget where they're going. You nod, pretending to understand, but you can feel it now, too. The canoe's rhythm has changed. It wobbles slightly, like the swells are tripping over themselves. You hadn't noticed it before because you didn't know what to notice. One paddler begins a quiet chant under her breath, protective, rhythmic, not panicked but purposeful. This isn't fear, it's respect. You ask if the land is still in reach. Your navigator glances sideways. Yes, but not through there. And now you see it off to the starboard side. The water glints wrong. The surface is too smooth in some places, too rough in others. It's the ocean's version of side-eye. There are many reasons to avoid an area like this. One fringe example, some regions were believed to be cursed, not metaphorically, but in the real lingering energy sense. places where rival Ali'i chiefs were buried at sea or where entire villages disappeared after a storm. Canoes would steer miles out of their way to avoid them. Not out of superstition, but experience. You remember hearing earlier about the island of Kaho'olawe. Once used for ceremonial navigation training, it was also known for its difficult currents. Young navigators were tested there. If you could find your way to and from Kaho'olawe without being spun in circles, you were ready. This might be one of those areas. A test, though you didn't ask for it. Your navigator begins humming a pattern. 3 notes, pause, 2 notes. A code. The paddlers respond with a shift in their rhythm. You don't know what it means, but it feels like a precaution, a little extra care. He tells you a story almost lazily once a canoe tried to cross this area during the wrong moon phase. The swells turned inward, like a trap. They spun the hull until the lashings snapped. No one died, but they floated for 3 days before being found. You glance out again at the off-water. There are no monsters here, just mistakes repeated. This isn't like avoiding a reef. It's not about physical obstacles. It's about reading the mood of the ocean and knowing when to step aside. A kind of maritime etiquette. The sea doesn't explain itself. It expects you to pay attention. You ask how navigators learn where these places are. He replies simply, "The ocean teaches. If you survive, you remember." Charming. But the information is passed down too quietly, orally, in coded phrases. Some chants don't just tell you what to do. They tell you what not to do. Where not to sail, where not to stop, which reefs never give back what they take. You realize something profound. These gaps in the map are not accidents. They're spaces where knowledge deliberately lives in silence, because silence protects. One paddler taps a rhythm on the hull. One long, one short, repeated. You recognize it now. It's a signal used during long-distance voyages, eyes wide. A reminder to stay sharp, especially when things look fine. And then you feel it. A tug. The canoe shudders ever so slightly, then smooths again. You grip the hull instinctively. Your navigator doesn't react. Which means that was expected. Maybe even welcomed. "We've passed it," he says at last. And with that, the hush lifts. A few quiet exhales. The paddlers return to a steady rhythm. The chant fades. The sea resumes its usual music. You didn't detour far, maybe a mile, but the emotional distance was vast. Now the water smells different again, fresher maybe, less ominous. You didn't see a danger zone, but you felt it. And more importantly, you respected it. You lean back and glance skyward. Clouds drift lazily. The breeze is warm. The land is still there, clearer now. But you're no longer racing toward it. You're easing in, letting the ocean grant you permission instead of demanding arrival. You now understand navigation isn't about forcing your way through space. It's about listening to what the sea allows and choosing to obey when it whispers, "Not here, not now." The fog rolls in softly at first, just a light veil, then thickening into a hushed curtain that swallows the sky, the horizon, and every visible cue you've grown to rely on. The world goes quiet. The colors flatten. You can't tell where the sea ends or where the air begins. The stars are gone. The sun is just a bright suggestion somewhere above. Even the wind seems uncertain, shifting nervously like a child caught sneaking sweets. Your first instinct is panic. After all the signs, the fish, the stars, the swells, you're now adrift in a grey bowl of nothing. No sightlines, no birds, no shadows. But your navigator, he's completely at peace. You whisper, "Now what?" He doesn't answer right away. He stands still, closes his eyes, and simply listens. You follow his lead hesitantly at first. And then something happens. You begin to hear more. A swell brushes the canoe at an angle slightly different than before. A whisper of wind brushes your left cheek instead of your right. The canoe creaks differently now, the sound bouncing closer on one side than the other. He speaks at last. When you cannot see, you remember. Historians still argue whether ancient navigators trained for fog specifically, but the answer seems obvious when you see it firsthand. Of course they did. The ocean doesn't care about perfect conditions. Sometimes the stars hide, sometimes the clouds mock you. But the sea? The sea still talks. Your navigator squats near the hull again, running his fingers in slow arcs through the water. The swell hasn't changed, he murmurs more to himself than to you. That's the point. While the sky might disappear, the ocean doesn't lie. Here's the key trick. The swell kai olo olo carries direction. It's the memory of a faraway wind, the long echoing heartbeat of storms that passed days ago. That direction persists sometimes for hundreds of miles. If you remember where the swell was before the fog, you follow it. Not with your eyes, with your spine. It's subtle, this kind of navigation. The canoe's motion changes ever so slightly with each shift in position. The roll, the tilt, even the pressure against the soles of your feet, it all feeds your inner compass. And yes, that sounds dramatic, but then you realize your navigator hasn't looked up once. Quirky tidbit for you, some traditional navigators were trained to sense current changes through their ears. No joke. By lying flat in the canoe, ear pressed to the wood, they could detect variations in hull vibration caused by subtle current shifts. If you think that sounds like wizardry, you're not alone. You try it. Lie back. Press your cheek to the lashings. Breathe. At first you hear nothing, just the blood in your own ears and the distant squawk of a frustrated seabird, probably equally lost in this soup of sky. But after a few moments you hear something else rhythm, a soft thud, thud, thud that comes from beneath, not above. Maybe it's the canoe bouncing off a familiar pulse in the swell. Maybe it's in your head. Your navigator taps you gently. Still on course, he says. How do you know? He just points to his chest. The canoe tells me. You're not sure if he's being poetic or literal. Probably both. The fog thickens, then suddenly lifts a little like a curtain reluctantly opening at intermission. A sliver of sunlight slices through, catching the tip of the sail. But no horizon appears. No bird comes to save you. Just the grey and the heartbeat of the sea. The paddlers are steady. They've adjusted their pace slightly, not faster, not slower, but more measured. There's a rhythm to it. You realize they, too, are navigating through feel. You ask, what if we're off course? Your navigator shrugs, not dismissively, but confidently. We won't be. But what if? We won't be. You almost want to challenge him. But then he starts humming again, a low, even chant. You recognize the cadence. It's the same star path chant from before, but now he's singing it even though the stars are gone. You listen more closely. He's naming where each star should be, where it would rise if the sky were clear. He's tracking an invisible sky, and suddenly you get it. The stars may be hidden, but the map remains. He's holding it in his head. The song is the sky. The chant is the compass. This is the skill beneath the spectacle. The resilience behind the romantic idea of wayfinding. It's not about luck or being blessed by good weather. It's about continuing even when all your tools vanish. When you feel like you're blind but realize your other senses have been preparing for this moment all along. You think about modern life, how often we panic when we lose one sense of orientation. No signal. Lost. No signs stuck. But here, with no visible guide, your navigator is more sure than ever, because he knows the sea will test you. The clouds will hide your stars. The birds will vanish. And still you sail. Eventually the fog begins to lighten. Not all at once, just a soft fade. You see the outline of the sun again. A bird flutters across your path. The color returns to the water. You never stopped moving forward. You didn't drift aimlessly. You listened. You remembered. You trusted. That's what real navigation is, not following what's easy, but trusting what's quiet. The fog has thinned, lifting like a sleepy eyelid. And with it returns the shimmer of sunlight across the waves. Still no land in sight, but your navigator isn't concerned. In fact, he's smiling again, softly, like someone who's heard the answer to a riddle no one else noticed was being asked. He reaches into a bundle tucked at the base of the sail and pulls out something surprising, a bundle of fragrant leaves wrapped around a small stone, and what looks like a polished shell. Then, with a nod to the sea, he sets it aside, not to use, but to remember. You've entered the realm of mental navigation now, the invisible, highly disciplined part, the part they don't sing about in the chants. You watch as your navigator closes his eyes, not to nap, but to replay. He's using what some call the memory palace of the Pacific, an internal architecture of cues, stories, smells, rhythms, all arranged in the mind like furniture in a sacred house. He doesn't rely on maps, he is the map. It starts with chants, rhythmic phrases that aren't just beautiful, but functional. Each one layers information. You've heard some already lines that name stars, in order chants that call winds by name, lists of islands grouped by their sailing times from a central point. But now you realize these aren't standalone. They stack. You ask quietly, how do you keep it all straight? He opens one eye and replies, you put each thing in its place. Turns out navigators built mental island chains in their heads. One chant represents a route from Hilo to Lanai. Another covers the stars from northern Tahiti to the Big Island. A third might include fish species seen in sequence when crossing a channel. When one chant ends, the next picks up where it left off like a relay race for memory. Historians still puzzle over how this cognitive system was maintained for generations with no writing, no paper, no ink. But maybe the secret is that they didn't just remember the information, they lived it. You see it now. The navigator tilts his head slightly, his fingers drumming a soft beat. It's the rhythm of an island approach. Not visual, not verbal, tactile. He's syncing his memory to the sea's current reality. He explains softly. Every island has a feel, a texture in the swell, a smell in the wind. You memorize it once and never forget it. You ask about smells again, unsure if he's being metaphorical. No, he says. Smell is fastest. Smell hits before sight. That catches you off guard. But it makes sense. The scent of guava trees, wood smoke, volcanic rock, warmed by sun, all of these linger in the air well before land breaks the horizon. In fact, many navigators could identify an island just by inhaling. One elder even claimed he could tell the season of a landfall by whether the wind carried plumeria or fresh taro. You want to test yourself now. You close your eyes, trying to sense something beyond your usual range. And faintly you do. A richness in the air. Earthy. Warm. A blend of green and salt. Lanai, you guess. Your navigator chuckles. Not bad. You grin. Not bad is high praise around here. Another trick of memory, navigators sometimes anchor information to smell or texture. For instance, a certain chant might begin with the scent of kukui blossoms, linking the first verse to a particular bay where those trees grow thick. Another might use the roughness of lava rock as a mental marker for shifting currents. Even taste has a role. Certain coastal waters taste faintly metallic, especially after storms. That's a known sign you're approaching a freshwater outflow. Your navigator once learned a chant where every verse matched a water taste. No joke. And then there's movement kinesthetic memory. Your body learns patterns the same way your tongue learns songs. If your hips shift a certain way while the canoe crests a swell, and that shift happens every 20 breaths, you know you're riding a steady current. Your spine becomes a compass needle. Fringe detail, some elder navigators trained apprentices to sit blindfolded in a dry canoe rocked by others in patterns that mimicked actual swells. The goal, teach your body before your brain. Because in fog at night or with eyes shut, it's the body that remembers first. You begin to see why true navigators were so rare. It's not about toughness, it's about total immersion. You don't just memorize chants. You become the chant. And there's no graduation, no certificate. The ocean gives you tests whenever it pleases. And your reward arrival. Your navigator pulls the bundle of leaves to his nose and inhales deeply. This one, he says, reminds me of Tahiti. Not because it's from Tahiti, but because the scent mimics the warm, humid smell of a certain port's morning wind. Your mind spins. He's built an entire sensory library in his head, and he navigates by flipping through it, nose, ears, skin memory. It's the most analog jeeps ever, and somehow the most precise. He leans back. "We're close," he says again. You don't ask how he knows. You already know what he'd say, because now you're starting to feel it too. The morning light sharpens, shimmering across the water's surface like 1,000 coins dropped from the sky. You squint toward the horizon. They're finally a definitive silhouette. Not a trick of light. Not a cloud pretending to be something more. This is land. But what you don't expect is how accurate the arrival is. You've crossed miles, maybe hundreds, with nothing but swells, stars, birds, and the occasional fish face-planting onto the deck. And yet the canoe is gliding toward a beach you could throw a stone at. Not just the right island, not just the right coast, the right bay. How? Your navigator smiles faintly. Precision is in the pattern. Historians often assume early seafaring was approximate. That arrival was a matter of close enough. But here you are, bearing down on a familiar cove with the grace of someone pulling into their own driveway. You ask, half joking, "You've done this before." He doesn't laugh. "I've felt this before." Turns out final landfall isn't just a matter of luck, it's its own complex skill set. Navigators didn't just aim for islands. They aimed for specific points along an island's coast, adjusting as they went, using every sensory tool in their arsenal. The swells change first. You feel it now. The canoe has a different rhythm, a subtle hiccup in the glide. The waves aren't just pushing. They're wrapping, bending, folding back on themselves. This is refraction ocean waves bouncing off land, creating a new pattern in the water. And your navigator rides those reflections like a violinist listening for echoes in a cave. He angles the canoe ever so slightly, not much, but it's enough. Then the birds. They don't just fly overhead, they funnel. Some circle, others dart directly inland. One turn hovers, then veers left. Your navigator watches. He sees invisible lines forming from wings and instincts. One paddler raises a hand and gestures to the clouds. A fat cumulus formation is just hanging over a point on the shore, low, steady, not moving much. That's the land's breath, rising warmth, pulling water vapor upward. A beacon without electricity. And then the scent. You inhale. Guava maybe. Charcoal smoke carried lightly. Possibly. There's also something sweet and floral. You realize the scent has changed 3 times in the last 20 minutes. That's no accident. Each scent corresponds to a wind zone, a vegetation band, a valley. Your navigator inhales too and nods. Puna, he says, naming the district without needing to see a signpost. You're still trying to figure out how he could possibly know this when he begins to chant softly again. This time, the words list features reefs, beaches, hills, winds. A kind of verbal checklist. He's comparing what he feels and sees to what the chant describes. You suddenly notice something else. The color of the water changes again. Not just in tone, but in behavior. It swirls slightly, pushing diagonally now. A current unique to this bay. He adjusts again. It's like threading a needle with a sail. Fringe. Tidbit. Some navigators could identify their landfall by the sound of waves hitting the coastline. How the roar echoed off cliffs, or whether it ended in a hiss or a crash. One legendary figure reportedly turned back during a voyage because the sound of arrival didn't match what he remembered from childhood. He was right, they'd overshot by a mile. Now, as the land looms larger, you realize something magical. You've never felt more certain about your location. Not even in a car with a working jeeps, because this certainty isn't algorithmic. It's earned. You spot a grove of trees and your navigator nods. Those trees are meant to be here. They're your confirmation. The canoe drifts to the left exactly as it should, nosing gently into the lee side of the bay. And still no cheers. No high fives, just calm, practiced precision. Arrival to a master navigator isn't a surprise. It's the fulfillment of a long conversation with the sea. As the paddlers slow their rhythm, the water beneath you turns glassy. The swell has flattened, the wind relaxed. You're in the island's embrace now. One final chant begins this one short, almost sleepy. A welcome home, a thank you to the canoe, a nod to the sea, and there it is, the beach. Your paddle dips into the shallows, brushing sand just beneath the surface. You've made it. Not with a compass, not with a chart, but with memory rhythm and a trust so complete it humbles you. You step onto the sand and look back at the canoe. It floats gently, resting after a long, perfect landing. And you've arrived, precisely where you were meant to be. You expected the beach to feel like an end, a finish line, the ceremonial throwing down of metaphorical paddles. But it doesn't. It feels like a pause, a breath, a moment between questions, not a final answer. Your navigator steps lightly onto the sand, turns his back to the canoe, and lifts a handful of it in his fist. He lets the grains fall slowly through his fingers, as if measuring something more than texture. Still warm, he mutters, smiling. You assume he means the land, but he could just as easily be referring to the voyage itself. The feeling of it, the shape it made in his mind. Because now comes the afterpart of wayfinding something just as sacred as the voyage itself. First, the ritual. No one bolts for shade or food. No one splashes dramatically into the surf to celebrate survival. They move quietly, calmly, like they've done this 100 times before, and most of them probably have. A few of the paddlers kneel near the shore and begin gathering stones, rounded water-worn, and begin to build a kwahu, a small altar. You watch as your navigator approaches it, lays down a fresh tie leaf and a piece of dry wood. He chants softly. Not a chant to ask for direction, but one of thanks. You catch a few words. They're about gratitude, about the sea's mercy, about the ancestors who watched overhead, and the swells who didn't turn jealous halfway through. Historians sometimes reduce these rituals to superstition or ceremonial tradition. But if you've made it this far, you know better. This isn't superstition. It's conversation. You wouldn't end a long phone call with a loved one by just hanging up. You say goodbye. You say thank you. You acknowledge the effort. That's what this is. The navigator kneels in front of the kwahu, whispers something you can't hear, and presses his palm to the sand again. Then, without a word, he stands and starts checking the canoe. Not dramatically, not frantically, just methodically lashing hull tension, paddle storage. It's the reset. Because even though you've just landed, the next journey is already somewhere in his mind. You ask, do you always do this? He nods. The canoe must rest clean. There's a principle in traditional wayfinding called malama wa, to care for the canoe, as if it's a living being. Because it is. Without it, you're nothing but driftwood. Your canoe is not just a vessel. It's a partner, a memory keeper, a listener to every wave you rode. You help coil a rope and find yourself patting the wood gently, like thanking a horse after a long ride. You don't know when you became that person, but it feels right. One of the older paddlers is now sketching something into the sand near the canoe with the tip of a stick. At first, it looks like a child's doodle, but you realize it's a route, a recap of your journey. Not for show, for reflection. The paddlers gather round it, adding details: where the fog came in, where the fish swam weirdly, where the stars broke through, where the swell changed. It's not performative, it's preservation. Memory passed not through ink, but shared voice. One paddler adds a fishhook shape to mark where the current snapped suddenly. Another draws a tiny arch for the clouds that sat over the landfall bay. Your navigator watches silently, then smooths one corner with his foot, not erasing, just correcting. This is how knowledge lives here, not in books but in bodies and sand and shared stories. Quirky detail: some crews would return home and reenact the voyage with sticks and leaves in the village square, not as theatre, as teaching. And everyone, young, old, even those who couldn't sail, would watch and learn. That way the journey outlived the travelers. You sit back, warmed by the sun, and look out to sea. The water you just crossed looks the same now. Same blue, same breeze. But you've changed, because now you understand how to read it. You see the curve of the waves differently. Hear the wind as a sentence, not just a sensation. You recognize that the sea doesn't hide things, it offers them. You just need to learn how to say thank you. Your navigator finishes checking the lashings, gives you a nod. It was a good journey, he says. You nod back. Would you do it again? He doesn't answer. Instead, he points not to the canoe, not to the sky, but to the path of footprints in the wet sand leading inland. Because here's the thing, no one tells you about wayfinding the sea is only half of the story. The rest lies in what you bring from it, back to land. The canoe may rest, but your mind keeps sailing. You follow the path of footprints inland, but your mind, like your balance, still sways gently, as if the canoe were stitched to your bones. The land feels too still now, too grounded. No swell beneath your heels, no wind narrating its secrets. Just the firm, stubborn presence of earth. But even here, the voyage continues. Your navigator walks beside you, not speaking, just listening. His eyes scan the trees, the angle of light on the leaves, the way the birds hop and tilt their heads. He's still reading, still navigating, only now it's the land's turn to speak. He pauses to kneel near a stream, cups water in his hands, drinks. Then he sets a stone gently at the stream's edge. Not a ritual exactly, just a gesture. A punctuation mark after a long paragraph. You mimic the action. Drink, set a stone, say nothing. There's no ceremony waiting for you here. No cheering crowd, no drums, no lay. Just bird song, wind, and the distant hush of waves against the reef. And yet it feels like the most sacred welcome. He finally turns to you and says, "You'll forget the stars if you don't talk about them." You nod, because you know what he means. Knowledge like this doesn't live long in silence. It lives in retelling, in sketches on sand, in chants sung at dusk, in passing fishhooks down the generations. Historians still debate whether wayfinding could have truly been passed on without writing. But you've seen it now. The answer isn't ink, it's attention, reverence, repetition. You ask what happens next? He gestures back toward the sea. Another voyage, or maybe this story. You smile, because now you understand. To navigate is to remember, and to remember is to tell. Even now, as you sit beneath the trees, the canoe tied and resting, the memory already begins to shift. Not fade, but change. It softens around the edges. The hard parts feel more poetic, the quiet parts more profound. That's not forgetfulness. That's story-making. You think of the journey, the starlings, the chants, the way birds revealed what maps never could. The fish, the fog, the patch of sea that said not today. The way your spine knew where to go before your eyes did. And somewhere inside, something settles. A strange comfort that even in a world of satellites and screens, there are people still sailing by, feel by chant, by fish, and by wind. People who trust their bodies to hold memory the way others trust machines. The path back to the canoe is still fresh in the sand, but you don't walk it. Not yet. Instead, you close your eyes, take a long breath, and begin to hum. Not a song. A chart. Not for you. For the person who will sail after you. And so we wind down now together. The canoe rests quietly, and so do you. The breeze has softened like someone dimming the volume on the day. The birds are quieter now, just faint chirps tucked into the trees. Even the waves seem more polite, brushing the shore with a kind of sleepy respect. You lie back, feeling the rhythm of the journey still echoing faintly in your body. The soft pulse of the swells, the hum of the navigator's chant, the way the stars moved like breath over an ancient map. All of it still with you. The air smells faintly of salt and flowers. Somewhere a palm frond rustles, and you hear the creak of a paddle being tied down for the night. The navigator is likely already asleep, dreaming of swells that whisper and birds that never lie. And you've earned your rest. You've crossed the ocean without a map. You've learned to read the sea like a poem. You've trusted wind and memory more than screens and compasses. That's not just history. That's something rare, something sacred. Let it stay with you now. Let the chant fade gently into your bones. Let your breath slow. Let the world go soft. You are home. You are safe. And wherever your next journey leads, the sea will remember your name. Sleep well, sailor. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.